I'm going to let Craig do the official intro, but I've known Adam for, I think, over 12 years, a long time. Next to each other across the street at Razorfish 12 years ago, and one of the most talented, inspirational designers I've ever met. And yeah, he's pretty badass, so I think you'll enjoy his show and his work. But Craig, take it.
Yeah, here's your brew, dude. All right, so this is Adam Larson from Adam&Co. After graduating Syracuse with a BFA in illustration, Adam Larson returned to Boston to pursue a career in graphic design. He spent 10 years working for various design and advertising agencies, and in 2007, he left Arnold, where he was a VP creative director, to open Adam&Co, a studio specializing in creative direction, branding, packaging, and design. He has led both large and small creative initiatives for an impressive list of clients, including 2K Sports, Absolut Vodka, Beyoncé, Dave Matthews Band, Diesel, ESPN, Harvard University, Jack Daniels, K-Swiss, Madonna, MIT, Nike, PF Flyers, P&G, which is Procter & Gamble, Samuel Adams, Sony, Timberland, and the Truth Campaign. His work has been featured in numerous books and magazines and has received many competitive awards, including the One Show, D&AD, Cannes Lions, the Clio Awards, Communication Arts, Graphis, Creative Review, and 2 Primetime Emmy Award nominations. Larson was a founding editor and contributor of Lemon Magazine. He lives and works in Boston, where he teaches package design at Massachusetts College of Art and Design. Without further ado, Adam Larson.
Thank you very much. That pretty much kills my first slide, so I'm going to go on to my second slide. A little bit about how I currently work. That covered a lot of how I got to where I am today. I worked in advertising for about 10 years, design firms, advertising agencies, and whatnot. And after 10 years doing that, I realized it was probably time to go out on my own, to practice my own idea of what design is. So today, top tier here, we got, the way I'm structured is basically, it's me on a daily basis, managing most everything. I have a freelancer that I bring in pretty regularly, steadily, to help with design mostly. And then I rely on a network of people that are across all different genres of design and production. So whether it's photographers, videographers, editors, copywriters, and whatnot. It's a stable of other freelancers that I rely on, and we all work together. The way while working in advertising in design firms, I developed a strong network of people that sort of became my web that I could rely on when I went on my own. And so today, the way I get work basically is through three different channels that do overlap with each other, but also stand somewhat autonomous to each other at the same time. The first being word of mouth, which is recommendations based on work that I've done for people to date, people who've seen my work in other places or know people who I've worked with. Agencies, I still do a lot of subcontract work for ad agencies and design firms that don't necessarily have the capability or overhead to produce what it is needed at a certain time, so I can offer a slightly different perspective or some additional support to their existing capabilities. And then I have a rep in New York who is slightly different than the other two in that they're actively pursuing clients for me. It's more of an intimate relationship. They know specifically what the types of work that I'm good at, and they pursue that work for me. It's a mutual relationship. They get paid when I get paid, so it's somewhat equal reliance, but it's a very healthy relationship to have for me. So in thinking about this presentation, I was trying to think of a topic that would relate to a crossover design discipline. And one question I get asked a lot as a designer is, what's your process? And I imagine most designers do get asked that question a lot when you're engaging with a new client. I hate this question because it, for me, is somewhat of a difficult thing to answer. I don't necessarily have a process per se. I think of it more as like a formula. The formula looks something like this. You start with an objective, which is basically the who, the what, audience, the why, the goals, all that stuff that comes at the onset. You get, we need this, from whoever it is that needs it. You add to that a ton of variables, and these variables, for me, these are the parts that people often overlook, but are very important to the whole process, well, the whole structure rather, in that they differ every time. So the resources that are available to you, the resources that you need to involve to support what it is that you need to do, the parameters of the project itself, the format that it needs to be delivered in, the location in which it needs to happen, most importantly, the time that we have to do it in. For me personally, I don't know about you guys, but I never get a lot of time, so that's key to why I don't really have a static process. These two combined basically get you to reality. And by reality, I mean you understand at this point what it is that needs to be done. Through that, hopefully you can develop a quick strategy. Again, going back to the fact that there's rarely ample time to really think of an elaborate strategy. Thinking fast, you get some sort of a strategy that brings you back into, well, which is essentially, how the hell am I going to make this happen? Inspiration is key. For me personally, it's sort of like the magic moment that happens in a project where you start with an objective, variables, all that stuff exists. Inspiration is what takes it from something that they think they need into something that it can become, and hopefully useful at the end. So that's a source, an idea, a look and feel, or basically a concept. Add to that instinct, and this is the part that no one really ever understands when you're asked as a client who's about to pay you to do something. You say, oh, well, it's all based on instinct. People don't want to pay for that, But for me, that's the reason I got into this. It's instinctual to be creative and think about things in a creative way, create things just because you feel the need to do it. So this is where play and experimentation comes into play, and visualizing an idea and bringing it to life. And then obviously through a series of edits and re-edits, you get to what is ultimately going to be the solution. So again, I go back to the idea of clients asking, what is your process? If I were to present this, I wouldn't pay me to do this. And I don't know many people that do. So I try to say, process is different every time. So in a way to sort of help illustrate this, I thought I'd walk through a couple of projects and show how they relate to each other, but then how they also differ based on those variables. First project was for MIT. MIT is an amazing institution, as I'm sure most of you know, familiar with. In being in Boston and growing up here, I always was a fan of it, just being somewhat of a science nerd myself and also creative. I think MIT does an amazing job of merging those two worlds. So when I went on my own, that was one of my goals, was to work with MIT. Unfortunately, I developed a relationship with them, was able to get some projects that led to more, and ultimately that's how it came to be. So for this project, the objective was to create a visual identity for the McDermott Award in the Arts at MIT. So, MIT's a fairly small school, but it has so many initiatives and so many alumni that then create new initiatives. The McDermott Award in the Arts at MIT is a cash award that's given out every year, $75,000 to artists within their particular field of study who are showing proven excellence. So it could be anything from digital media artists to writers to composers to conductors or whatever it is. So the overall picture is the arts at large. The variables for this project was that since 1974, which when the award was first launched, they never had a logo, an identity, or even a physical award to go along with this cash prize. So for me, the strategy came rather quickly that in order to create an identity that would actually represent an award, we needed an award itself. We couldn't just design a logo that had nothing to do with anything, that didn't speak to something physical. At least that's how I approached it. The brief did not include an award. It was more, I went back to them and presented the idea of designing an award to help get to an identity. So from there, I just started to think of how, a source of inspiration. Like I said, it's always key part of the process for me, or the non-process, I guess. And in thinking about the arts at large, it's hard to think of somewhat of an icon that embodies all that huge sphere, which is known for the past 37 years that it has existed, but for the future to come, what does creativity mean in the future, So that's where I landed. I landed at creativity, and in a science MIT way, where does creativity come from? It comes from the right side of the brain. So the right side of the brain became an inspiration for the project. I started to think about ways to visualize an award that celebrated the right side of the brain in an iconic way, but a very scientific and sort of material-based way as well. So I presented 3 concepts, as you standard do with a client. The first being this one you see here is like a rendering showing a spherical object on the left side view, where the left side of the brain is represented in black, the right side is enlarged as if to celebrate the right side. And then as you see in the front view, the text would be engraved in there. And then that award would then translate into an actual logo where the C and the D, between the two, the relationship there became symbolic of that actual award. These two, so the guy in the middle there is Gustavo Dudamel. He was the winner of the year that they decided to launch the identity. The guy on the right was Bill Viola, who was a video artist who had won it in the past. And the guy on the left is Bill too, actually. This is the second concept, again, using the same idea, but this way the right side is more elevated, as if to celebrate it, as if it's, bigger and greater in this respect. And then again, developing a logo, as you see in the upper left, where the C and D combine to create the same idea. And then this direction was somewhat of a stray from it, but similar in that it's a celebration. This was a clear cube where the front frame had the logo, and you look in at the back wall was reflective, so you would see yourself reflected in the award itself. And then that shows how it would translate into promotional materials and posters to celebrate the different recipients. So the client loved the second idea, where the C and D, the D being raised and the McDermott logo was an extension of that idea. This was the final award. MIT is definitely a quirky place, and they pride themselves on their quirkiness, which is what I love about it too. It's unique to them. So everything that they do, they want to have that sort of MIT wink, if you will, that's embedded in it. So this was my way of getting there. It's an orb-like metal object that looks somewhat mysterious. It looks like an eye in this form, but through a magnetic device inside of it, it slides open to reveal the recipient's name, and then the logo is actually revealed in its open state. And then this is again just the logo itself, showing in pure form, applied to a series of promotional materials. The absence of a line between the C and D actually became the baseline for the type that then fell off of it. So its vertical orientation and horizontal orientation, that became the baseline that everything was justified against. Just in sort of like a nerdy design structure way, I want to point that out. So these were actual posters created for, commemorative posters created for Gustavo Dudamel, the 2009 recipient. And then, of course, it was applied to letterhead and website. Next project was for Nike, LeBron James specifically. LeBron has a shoe called the LeBron shoe, I guess. And much like Nike itself, in order to create desire and an ongoing need, and that of course is driven by capitalism, but they release a new shoe every year. So this was the LeBron 9. This was a big year for them to release the shoe. This was a word-of-mouth client for me. I had done a project for NBA 2K, and they were actually planning to release this shoe for the first time in the game itself. So when they were looking to create a promotional campaign for this product, they wanted someone that had worked on the game to do it, which is how I got it, which was kind of nice. The objective was to create a poster campaign for Nike to promote the launch of the LeBron 9. Variables were, it had to illustrate how the technology of the shoe, there were 6 key components to the shoe's design that paid off on the court. So there were different elements about performance on the court that were inherent in the shoe's design that supported those ideas. I had to use the provided imagery of LeBron, and the kicker on this one was we had less than a week. So I had to come up with something that was up to Nike's breaking ground standards of iconic design in less than a week. So the strategy kind of revealed itself. I had to think fast. I didn't really have a whole lot of time to come up with an idea or a strategy. I just had to come up with something. These were the photos that were given to me. This is a handful of probably 350 different photos that they had shot in 4 different setups of LeBron. So while they do relate in that they're all him, they're very different in the way they're shot and whatnot. So I had to think of a way to make these all work together in one campaign. And this was where the thinking fast came into play. While I was working in the McDermott Award, Doc Everton was a photographer that worked at MIT, and his photos hung outside the office of my client, McDermott. And as I was going there one day, I was just thinking, wow, that's kind of amazing. There are photographs, documenting motion in frame by frame sequence, showing how motion becomes a more interesting pattern-based thing when you still life it this way. In fact, combining those elements with the different photographs I have of LeBron could become an interesting vernacular for creating a technology story. So I quickly took the images, created a look based on the Everton images, and presented this one idea, as opposed to 3 like we did with McDermott, to the client just because we had very little time. And fortunately, they liked it quite a bit. So this, through a series of iterations, revisions, and whatnot, got to this. The 6 components were elevation, versatility, own your own position, transition, explosiveness, and velocity. So while the photographs weren't shot to illustrate those particular ideas, I composed them in such a way so that they could, in the end, communicate those ideas. And then I also tried to get the type to illustrate the same ideas as well. So the last project is for PF Flyers. PF Flyers is actually a local company. They're a classic American sneaker brand. They've been around since 1937. While they're well established and they're an amazing product and they have a decent following, they've sort of lost traction over the last decade or so due to varying agencies handling their brand and somewhat of a lack of interest in the brand itself for the people that owned it. So their objective was to leverage the current interest in American style to reestablish PF Flyers as a classic yet relevant American brand. The variables of this one were lost brand recognition, as I mentioned. No existing brand books, so we didn't really have a place to start from in terms of what it all means and how it all comes together based on all its history. But they did have an existing positioning, which they had been recently working on, called Authentic American Style. So the strategy was based specifically off the positioning. I mean, that was sort of the idea. Style first, make it real, make it American, and reiterate. It's the only way to get it out in the public and get people familiarized with it. The inspiration, as I mentioned, the brand is rich in history. It's rich in, ooh, that looks way crazy. Those colors aren't that neon. Since its inception in 1937, it's been part of Converse. It's had spin-off brands. It's been absorbed by other countries and companies, and then let go by other companies. But throughout it all, it had this inherent sense of American optimism, which is at the core of the brand itself. The PF stands for Posture Foundation. It was an insole that they designed early on, which differentiated them from others. It was comfortable to wear. Whereas, Chucks, a lot of people say, oh, those are Chuck Taylors. They're not Chuck Taylors. They're very comfortable, and that's sort of their difference, which makes it easier to wear and more fun. But all their advertising and their spin-offs and their collaborations were always based around that. So that became the inspiration. That was something that I wanted to bring back to the brand. And then additional inspiration was just real people. People with style and Americans that were everyday people that would have a relationship with the brand perhaps, or would represent the brand the way that we needed them to. So with that, I came up with the idea of doing a campaign based on real people who are American style makers, not necessarily massively huge, but more relatable on an everyday, common street pedestrian level. These are not photos that we shot, these are images that I pulled together just for reference to illustrate the idea of integrating a bit of the historical paraphernalia at the bottom as a wall texture, straightforward photo. And then the idea is these would be print ads that really drive you to a website where we do longer format interviews, video-based, where these people talk about style, their life, and all that stuff. So we pulled together about 6 people that we felt encapsulated the same sense of American style that the brand did. Ouija here on the left he's the founder of Brooklyn Circus in Brooklyn, amazing clothing line. He's also the fit model for the line, which is why everything looks really good on him. But he's a long-term fan of the brand. He's claimed if we did do footwear, it would be a PF Flyer shoe. So he was a no-brainer. He had actually come to us and said we want to work together. He was sort of the kickoff point for the brand. Rachel Chandler's a photographer in New York, inherent sense of American style. She kind of came to me, and then we had a series of others. ultimately, this, it does run in print ads, but all the print ads drive to the web. They are a little bit budget conscious, so we weren't doing a ton of print advertising and more leveraging the online presence. Just also given that the demographic uses the internet quite a bit. So this is the online and profile pages. So now I just wanted to show a couple excerpts of the videos themselves, just to give you a sense of the campaign.
Style is a form of communication. You say so much about who you are, where you're from, where you're headed, what's your interest in your style. The term that we've kind of coined is tailored casual. The aesthetics is really pulling from the past and bringing it forward. If I wasn't different, I kind of felt odd. Style is personal.
So that was Ouija. We got one more for you, just to show the versatility of the campaign. This is Nick Thune, a comedian out of LA.
My internet went down 3 days ago because my neighbors moved 3 days ago. We had a real good thing going. Frustrating. I change shoes like maybe 5 or 6 times a day. Because I have different shoes for like when I go down to my lemon orchard and I pick lemons, or when I'm showering, and I get out of the shower, I like to have a pair of fresh shoes right there. And people know I'm just like a crazy good skateboarder. So I've got shoes that I like to wear when I'm skateboarding, like jumping steps, the cool stuff. Kick flipping, I always land my kick flips. I have specific shoes I like when I'm just kind of aiming my gun out my window, just thinking about things. Or when I walk the dog, actually I like to say the dog's walking me, because it's really up to him where we go. A lot of shoes.
Cute, right? If you're interested, there's more on pfflyers.com. All right, that's all the time we got. Thank you very much.